Hey everyone, it's Sarah and I'm back to film my reading journal for the month of January. This video is going up quite late and that was mostly because my daughter ended up being born in the month of January instead of in February, so she was about 3.5 weeks early, and we've just been adjusting to life with a newborn and being first-time parents and finding time for our hobbies and activities. So diving right in, I had a pretty successful reading month overall, especially considering that I had a baby in the month of it, or in the middle of it. So I was able to read every day this month. I would say probably about an hour, hour and a half a day was pretty standard, but yeah, I was able to read every day, which was great. Then moving into what I was reading, I read 6 books this month, 2,303 pages, and my favorite book was Big Lies in a Small Town. And we'll get into each of the individual books in just a couple of minutes. Then looking at when I started and finished books, I was pretty much, reading a book or two a week. And then my daughter was born, and then I was trying to catch up and finish a couple of books at the end of the month before the month was over. So, and I did have a couple that I started and didn't finish, but overall, not a bad month in January, but you can definitely tell I was trying to squeeze stuff in at the end of it. Also looking at what I was reading, I always like to mark whether I was reading a Kindle, physical book, or an audiobook. And as the month progressed, you can tell that I switched over mostly to audiobooks just because that's been what's easiest for me to pick up and read, especially when I have to hold my daughter. Physical books have been really hard for me to read, and I have a lot of physical books right now checked out from the library, so I'm either going to have to just figure out a way to get them read, or maybe look at getting them digitally instead of physically from the library, or just check them out again in the future. So we'll see how that goes. I had the goals that I set for myself this month. Focusing on my TBR didn't really happen just because a lot of the books on my TBR that I had checked out from the library were physical books that I just ended up not being able to get to this month. Again, that kind of ties into goal 3, which was reading library books, and I only read 1. But I was able to read each day, which was good. Even if it was only for a little bit of time, it still makes me feel good to read a little bit every day. I had my list of books that I was working on. 3 I didn't finish this month. Hopefully I'll have them all finished in February. One of them is a physical book, and so that's been, again, a little bit difficult, so I still have quite a bit to go in Spy Mom. I might not finish that till March, maybe. I pulled a quote from Begin Again. Getting a new start doesn't mean you have to wipe the slate clean. Just pick up the pieces, begin again. I wrote down new releases I was interested in. I did pick up Onyx Storm, but I haven't read it. And then I still want to pick up Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, but just haven't done that yet. And then I have my bingo. This is just something I like to do. I got the idea originally from the Shelfie Chronicles, who is actually going out of business or closing her shop down. I can't remember when she's closing it down, but unfortunately she's just been having a lot of trouble with her stickers printing right and cutting right, and so it's gotten to the point where it's too difficult for her to solve all the problems, so she's just going to shut down the shop, which is unfortunate because I really do like her shop and I have a lot of her stickers in my reading journal. But anyways, she originally, or still had these bingo boards that you do monthly, and they'd have different themes and different prompts to go with the month. And then I've just been recreating them myself with, pulling prompts from like year-long challenges, reading challenges, things like that, just to kind of find things to focus on. So I did end up getting 2 bingos. And then it was funny too, because a couple of these could have fit in multiple bingo prompts, but I only count one book per prompt, or, you know, I don't assign the same book to multiple prompts, if that makes sense. And then I did use my notes pages just to kind of pre-plan or think about what books could fit into some of those prompts, which was helpful. So then moving back here, I have my Goodreads tracker. This one is from the Shelfie Chronicles. I finished 3 audiobooks, 2 physical books, and then 1 Kindle book this month. Then I have my monthly review. This is from Plan with Elise. It's a printable. And again, the 6 books, 2,303 pages. Then I have, this is a reading tracker from JoJo's Pretty Paper Shop. And I decided to color in my January books in blue. And I just filled them out sporadically on the bookshelf stickers. And then I also am using these printables from Plan with Elise that I think I've had in the last 2-3 years of reading journals that I just haven't used. And again, I'm going to color them in based on if it was, color coded by month, I guess. So blue for January. And then I also have the Reading 100 books, just depending on how many I make it through this year. I intend to get closer to the 100 books, but that also depends now that I have a daughter and a little less free time. Who knows what we'll end up reading. So then moving into the individual books, the first book I read this month was Begin Again. This one, I think my library, sometimes they will on Libby, which is where I download all of my digital audiobooks and, like Kindle books from the library. Sometimes they'll curate different lists, and I believe this one was curated as kind of like a Taylor Swift inspired list. And so I've had this, or, I put a hold on this book probably back in April, May, June, something like that. And I just don't think that there were very many copies available. So it took a really long time for it to become, available for me to read. But I thought this one was pretty cute. I gave it 4 stars. There's definitely like subtle Taylor Swift references, which is fun. And then obviously Begin Again is the name of a song. And in Begin Again, you have Andy as the main character. It's the spring semester of college, of freshman year. And she worked really hard. She was at community college. She didn't make it into her, preferred school. And she worked really hard and then ended up being a transfer student for the spring semester. And she transfers partially because she has this boyfriend who's going to Blue Ridge, and it was hard to be apart from him over the last, 6 months or whatever. And then also too, her parents both went to Blue Ridge, and her mom had kind of a lasting impact. Her mom started a pirate radio station there, and there was this competition that they talked about that was really impactful to her parents or to her mom. And so there's multiple reasons why she wants to go to this school. And so she transfers to be with her boyfriend, unbeknownst to her that her boyfriend has transferred to the community college. So, kind of one facet of her plan didn't work out. But it's all about her, getting integrated into this new school. She has a part-time job. She has this secret organization, Ribbons. It's basically a competition where each month they have certain things that you can do to earn these ribbons. And then if you end up with a certain amount of the different colored ribbons, then you're invited to join the secret societies at the end of the semester. So I think there's 3 different color ribbons. And so she's trying to earn enough ribbons for herself to get into these secret societies. And then she's also trying to get enough ribbons for her boyfriend to get into the secret societies when he transfers back the next semester. And, so she spends a lot of her time in these extracurricular activities, which was one of my reasons why I gave it 4 stars. But she must have all the time in the day, because I don't know how you would be able to, make it through all of your classes, have a part-time job, have, going to all of these events, then she gets another thing going on and another thing, and she has time for all of her friends, and then they go to trivia nights, and they, it just seems like she must be a superhero, or, the clock must have more than 24 hours in the day, something like that, because I just don't know anyone that could do as much as she does in this book. But I enjoyed the book. I thought it was fun. I thought the characters were fun. There were some characters I liked more than others, but all in all, I enjoyed the book a lot. I thought it was a fun, kind of lighthearted romance, but then, also too, it was kind of about friendship and other things as well. So then the next up, I read A is for Alibi. We actually listened to this as the audiobook. I don't know if the audiobook was my favorite way to experience it, but it was fine. I gave it 4 stars, probably more of like a 3.5 rounded up to a 4. You could also tell the age of this. I think it was published somewhere in the 80s, and so there were certain things that were maybe a little bit out of date in terms of, I guess, like some of the character viewpoints on, like women or things like that. So, and that isn't necessarily like a reason for taking off a star, but that's just something that I did notice. But in this book, you have Nikki, who went to prison for, I think it was 8 years, for killing her husband, but she's always claimed her innocence. She said that she didn't do it. Now she's out on parole, and she hires Kinsey, who is a private detective or a private investigator, and she hires Kinsey to find out what really happened to her husband, because, she still swears that she's not the one that killed her husband, and she just basically wants to know who did it, even though she's served the time and, all that good stuff. So, and her husband was, I think he was a lawyer who was poisoned. So Kinsey starts looking into, if it could have been a client, if it could have been someone that he worked with. He has an ex-wife, kind of starts exploring all of the different routes. He has grown children, to see who maybe could have done him in. So enjoyed it. It was a, kind of solid mystery. I gave it 4 stars. And then next up we have Underground. This has been on my TBR for a really long time, I think since 2020-ish. And I'd picked it up, or I had put it on my TBR just because it sounded interesting. And essentially it's called Underground, A Human History of the Worlds Beneath Our Feet. And essentially it just goes through some, that. It goes through, subways and caves, and it goes through, in Paris, how they have, like, the catacombs, and just different, tunnels, man-made and, naturally occurring underground places that could be explored. And it was interesting. I'd say the first chapter was a little all over the place for me. I had a little bit of a hard time getting into it the first chapter, just because it's the author talking about how he got interested in tunnels, and it kind of jumps all over the place between different parts of his life. And I get why it kind of moved all over the place, because, first he starts off in childhood, where he finds like an abandoned train tunnel and explores that, and, that kind of piques his interest. And then, in later life, then he's living in New York City, and then he finds out about, the tunnels, or the shut off tunnels in the subways that aren't used, or the subway stations that are closed off, or things like that. And then he gets in with some, like, urban explorers. And so, you know, he'll talk about kind of these different types of experiences that he's had. But like I said, the time will shift because he'll be talking about the subways, and, you know, he'll go through kind of like multiple points in his life about the subways, but then he'll also go back and talk about something else, a different tunnel related thing. So it's not all chronological, if that makes sense. It's kind of grouped based on experience for that first chapter. But then every subsequent chapter is very focused on one kind of experience. So it was easier to read after that first initial chapter. So like one chapter he's in Paris and they're going through the catacombs because they're basically trying to make it from one part of the city to the other part of the city all underground. And, you know, it's with a group of people, and then they talk about the catacombs, and they talk about like parties that have been thrown in the catacombs, and, you know, why some of them were built, or I don't know, it gets into a lot of history. And then obviously, like, he has an experience at each of these places that he's talking about to go along with it. I enjoyed it. It was very interesting. Definitely learned a lot of information that I didn't know to begin with or hadn't thought about. So yeah, I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was good. Like I said, a little bit of slow start, but I enjoyed it, you know. And it was only 288 pages, so not a very long read either. Next up, we have my favorite book for the month. This one is Big Lies in a Small Town. I wanted to get a story or a book that was either truth or lies for the buzzword challenge. And the book that I had wanted to read, I wasn't able to get in the month of January. And so when I was at the hospital, I decided to look and see what was available with lies or truth. So originally I was intending to pull something off my TBR, and this one ended up, you know, just being kind of a random pick, and then it ended up being my favorite book for the month. So sometimes it works out well and sometimes it doesn't, where I pull something not on my TBR. You know, sometimes it ends up being a really good pick, and other times it just ends up being okay. But Big Lies in a Small Town, it has 2 point of views or 2 timelines. You have Anna, who is an artist in the 40s, and she is hired to paint a post office mural for this town. I can't remember. I think it's maybe South Carolina, somewhere in the South. She's from New Jersey, and she had applied to do the New Jersey mural, but someone else was chosen for that one. And she ends up, you know, getting assigned to this place that she has no connection with. And so the townspeople are a little bit, you know, not on board with her necessarily. You know, they kind of push back, especially the men of the town, because they have an artist there that had applied and didn't get selected, and he's a man, and obviously it's like coming out of the Great Depression. And so I think that there's some animosity about this outsider coming and taking a job from someone in their own town and own community, even though she had nothing to do with the selection process or, you know, getting selected for this post office versus the one she wanted to do it for. And then the other timeline is in 2018, you have Morgan, and Morgan is in prison. She gets released, and she's tasked by this daughter of this famous painter from this small town who wants her to restore this post office mural. The mural never ended up getting hung up in the post office in the 40s when it was completed, because they say that the artist went crazy and like finished the mural, but then it never got put up for one reason or another. And then now they're opening up an art gallery in this town, and they want her to restore it to hang in the art gallery, you know, from now on. And so she's never done any art restoration, but it's this great opportunity for someone that's coming out of prison or jail, prison, and she's also a huge fan of this artist, and so she decides, to figure it out, to try it out, because, she needs this opportunity. And I really enjoyed the storylines. It was historical fiction, which I haven't read a lot of historical fiction lately, and it just hit in a good spot. There's some things that are kind of factually based, like these post office murals were a thing that I can't remember what the department was called, but it was essentially hiring people, to give people jobs to get out of the Great Depression. And, so there's like tidbits of history that were quite accurate. I mean, there were a lot of things that were, just interesting, based on the time and place of these two timelines. So anyways, I really enjoyed it. I thought the audiobook was really well done as well. It was 13 hours, but it felt like it had a good pace to the story. And, near the end, I just kept wanting to listen to it because I wanted to know what was going to happen. Then I listened to This Is Our Story. I gave it 5 stars. I think it'd probably be like a 4.5 rounded up to a 5. This one is a mystery, and in it you have 5 boys or teenagers that go hunting, and one of their friends ends up getting shot and killed on this hunting trip. And they're obviously covering up for whoever did it, because none of them are confessing to the crime. The gun has all of their fingerprints on it. And yeah, essentially their story is all the same. So they've kind of banded together, to create their own alibi. And so Kate has an internship at the DA's office, and the DA's office is basically, I think it's a grand jury to determine, they have a couple of weeks to figure out if they're charging the boys, if they can prove anything for the boys killing them or their friend, or if it was just going to be wrapped up as, a bad accident. And the boys all come from wealth, and so there's a little bit of that, trying to push the case through as quickly as possible so that none of these boys, are found at fault because their parents are rich or they have influence and things like that. So I don't know, I enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting. I liked the point of view that she was working at the DA's office, because it ended up, I don't know, it just kind of added a little bit of a different, it's not like the detective itself. It's not, a cop story. It's not really like from a family member. I don't know, just a slightly different point of view than I'm used to seeing in mysteries. And I enjoyed it. So, like I said, about 4.5 stars. I listened to it as the audiobook, and I obviously listened to it really fast because I did finish it in 2 days. And then last but not least, I finished What to Expect When You're Expecting. I never put this in my reading journal from last year, and so I kind of estimated on what day I'd actually started it based on when I ordered it and it arrived at my house. But essentially, What to Expect When You're Expecting is everything to expect when you're having a baby. So it goes through month by month, week by week, kind of tells you, oh, your baby has hair, or, you might be having this symptom, or, here's what to expect for labor. And so for me, I appreciated having a book that I could pick up that had all of that in one place. I tried to read it as I was going along. I'd say I probably picked it up every couple of weeks or so. Maybe not every week, but I enjoyed reading it and learning about it. So I gave it 5 stars just because it did what I wanted it to do. Yeah, and I felt like it was pretty complete. I did pick up What to Expect the first year. Haven't actually started reading that yet. So I'm sure some of the information I'll already know by the time read it, but I did appreciate having this as a reference. I will say at the end of the book, there were a couple of things that I guess I never looked at the glossary. I just started from the beginning and moved forward. And then obviously after my daughter was born, I quick finished it just to, you know, see if there was anything else that I needed. And there was a little bit of like postpartum and, you know, a little bit about like the first couple of weeks home with your baby. But at the end of the book too, there were a couple of things that would have been more relevant earlier in the pregnancy to read, but like I said, I was going start to finish, and I guess I didn't realize that there were a couple of things at the end of the book that would have been useful earlier, if that makes sense. So anyways, that was everything I read this month. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I don't know when I'll be back to film my February reads, but I will be back at some point to film that and go over those. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.